All right, let's do this. So before we officially start today, I just want to go over some logistics. We have a lot that we want to cover in today's presentation, so we will do our best to address questions as they come in. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to drop them in either the Q&A or the chat, and we will do our best to address those with the time that we have. Otherwise, we can follow up afterwards. You can connect with Kenton and I on LinkedIn or send us an email. Happy to continue the conversation after today's webinar. With that being said, let's go ahead and kick off today's session. So my name is Ryan Burgess. I'm the head of growth here at Intentwise. I have about 10 years of Amazon experience in the agency space and working for brands. Joined today with Kenton Snyder, customer success manager. Kenton, you want to give a quick overview of your experience?
Yeah, for sure. Like Ryan mentioned, my name is Kenton. I'm a customer success manager here at Intentwise. I recently joined the team at the start of the year, but prior to that, I was at an agency as well for the last 2 or so years, really working through, the end-to-end of campaign management on both sponsored ads and DSP. So excited to bring some of that experience to you guys today.
Awesome. So before we jump into the agenda, I want to give a quick overview of who Intentwise is in case you haven't heard of us. We are a software provider for brands and agencies that sell on Amazon, Criteo, Walmart, or Instacart. We have three solutions. One is Intentwise Ad Optimizer, which is a retail-aware ad optimization platform that allows you to use bid automation and rules to manage your advertising on these platforms. And it's also taking into account retail factors. As we know, those are very important in making advertising decisions. We have Intentwise Analytics Cloud, which is an automated reporting solution that connects to all of the APIs from Amazon, Walmart, Criteo, you name it, pulls the data that you need in together, connects it, and makes reporting very, very simple and powerful for you. And then we have Intentwise Explore, which is our solution that's built on top of AMC or Amazon Marketing Cloud that allows you to execute queries and build audiences from AMC without the need to write SQL yourself. In addition to all of these products, we also have a services team that can help you with custom work as needed. So if you have any questions about Intentwise, check out our website or don't hesitate to contact us after this webinar. All right, let's go through today's agenda. First, we're going to set the stage with some goals for Amazon DSP. I think it's important that for the rest of our presentation today, we have the right expectations for what DSP is used for. So we're going to start there. Then we're going to cover some of the DSP creatives and how they are tied to these goals and when you should use one creative versus another. Then we'll get really specific into the DSP order and line item settings and structures that you need to set up to have a good experience with DSP. We're going to talk about some strategies that are known for driving high ROAS with DSP and how to measure success for awareness campaigns. And then lastly, we will talk about how DSP and AMC together is the best case scenario. Before we jump in, I do want to launch just a quick poll to gauge everybody's experience on DSP or with DSP. It will be helpful as we tailor today's presentation for you. We're going to ask, who's managing your DSP currently, whether you do that in-house, if you have ad tech, maybe you work with an agency or Amazon does it for you. If you don't mind just giving us maybe a minute here, we'll get some responses and then we will tailor our presentation accordingly. Looks like, Kenton, we've got about a pretty good split here. Maybe 25% of our audience, 20% of our audience manages it in-house. Another 20% works with an agency, and about 40% actually is not running DSP today. So perfect. I think that gives us everything we need to know. We'll definitely spend some time in the settings, especially for those of you who are managing it yourselves, so you can ask questions about your setup and maybe how it compares to what we're recommending today. Thank you, everybody who answered that poll. And Kenton, let's jump right in.
For sure. So yeah, to start it off, we just wanted to kind of walk through some of the different goals or KPIs we might want to look at when we're measuring success on DSP. There's kind of two different approaches we can take, both looking at the mid to upper funnel and then looking at the lower funnel. And I think both are equally as important or something we want to run when we're looking at doing DSP. But they definitely have different measures of success when we're thinking about, the performance attributed to them. So starting off, we'll have our awareness campaigns, and this will be, going after those lifestyle audiences, those demographic audiences, which we'll get into a little bit more later. And within those, we're really going to be thinking about driving brand awareness, driving, interest in our brand. And so in those campaigns, we'll be really wanting to look at our impressions or reach as a measure of success. And then when we're running in-stream video, so maybe we're using a regular DSP video, we'll want to look at video completion rate to see how is the audience that we're going after, how are they resonating with the creatives that we're showcasing them. Also in that more non-purchase focused campaigns, we'll have consideration campaigns. So these will be like your in-market segments and things along those lines. Here we'll be looking at detail page view rate and click-through rate, really with the goal here of driving those product page views, taking someone from the awareness of your product to showing that intent or interest in your product, so that we can kind of segment those customers down a little bit more as we get into the purchase funnel. When we get down to that purchase phase, we'll be thinking about things such as conversion rate, ROAS, and ACoS, really with the intent here of targeting people who are already aware of our brand, already have showed intent in our brand. So these are going to be things like retargeting past paid viewers, retargeting past purchasers, things along those lines. And then when we get into loyalty, really the goal here is going to be either like a cross sell or a subscribe and save, going after people who have purchased from you in the past, really creating brand advocates for your brand. And so here we'll be looking at things like lifetime value, subscribe and save amounts, and just their overall purchase amount from your brand.
Awesome. Yeah, and the reason we're starting here is because there seems to be a lot of misconception about what DSP is, and a lot of people think it's, upper funnel exclusively, but of course there are options for high ROAS events within a DSP, and the goals that you have and the creatives that you use and the strategy, the way you set it up will be different based on what you are trying to accomplish with DSP, whether that's high ROAS or one of these other goals. So with that in mind, let's talk through some of the creatives here and how you would use them, Kenton, based on the different stages of the funnel.
Yeah, for sure. So, like we kind of talked about there, there's going to be some differences in what we're going to be looking to run in each of these phases. So when we're thinking about awareness, again, really thinking about driving awareness to our brand or, getting customers to show intent. Here, we're going to be thinking about those video creative types. These are going to allow us to tell more of our brand story and kind of get that initial interest from people who are just entering the aisle or maybe thinking about shopping within our product category. So here we'll want to look at streaming TV assets. And so these are going to be that upper funnel connected TV inventory. And really want to tailor these creatives to focus on telling that brand story, calling out what makes your product unique from the competition, and drawing that initial interest in your brand. And so we'll be going after things like demographic and lifestyle audiences here. And again, this will be where we're really wanting to look at like branded searches or impressions as measures of success. And then we'll get a little farther down the funnel and we'll look at DSP video. We kind of break this down into two different areas so we can have this whether in both the awareness funnel and the consideration funnel based on the audiences we're targeting and the way we tailor the creative. So when we're thinking about this as an awareness play, probably still going after those more upper funnel audiences, I would always tailor it to think about, again, how can we tell our brand story as overall versus focusing on specific product callouts or things along those lines. So within this, again, we're just trying to grab that initial interest in our brand before we move them into the funnel based off the specific product category they're shopping in. When we get a little lower and we've realized that this customer is actively shopping in a certain product category, maybe for an in-market audience, that's where we would want to use more of this product education videos. So we could still use DSP video here, but we would want to focus more on product callouts, what makes our product unique from the competition within that direct market, similar to what you might have from a sponsor brand video, optimizing it to be played both with and without sound, since it will be in-stream videos. And really here, what we're going to be looking at as a measure of success is like video completion rate, detail page view rate, things along those lines, people showing that they have that extra interest in your brand and your product. On top of that, in the consideration funnel, we'll also have display ads. So this will be a little farther down. We really want to focus on the in-market audiences here, or even you could get, start to play with these in the purchase phase as well. But really within the consideration side of things, we'll want to, again, focus on those product callouts. What's great about display ads is we'll be able to upload our own unique creatives and that are tailored to our brand and our messaging. And so we'll be able to call out the specific product features that make our product unique based off of our market research. And so we can do, call out our selling points here to try to move them down into that purchase funnel. And again, here we'll be thinking about things like click-through rate and detail page view rate, really trying to get customers to show that intent to purchase. And then when we do get down to that purchase phase and we've seen that intent and we're going after people who are previous viewers of our brand pages, we would want to think about responsive e-commerce creatives. Responsive e-commerce creatives are great because not only are they adaptive, which we'll talk a little bit more about, but they're also can be built straight into Amazon console. So to build these out, you'll just enter an ASIN, a headline, and enter your brand logo, and Amazon will automatically create all the sizes you would need to, run these assets. And so this is great for brands that, don't have in-depth creative assets, but I still would recommend running it even if you have extensive, branded creatives for that purchase phase because of the adaptability that this is going to provide on Amazon's side. Amazon wants to see us get those purchases. So what they've done with these assets is they've brought in different adaptive features like showcasing reviews or showcasing your star ratings or a coupon you might be running. And it's going to filter between those different creative types automatically based off of the customer's past purchase journeys and purchase intent. And so that's going to make things really easy when we're thinking about how can we drive those additional purchases.
Awesome. And I know this is a lot of text on the screen. We're going to show you some examples here next of what these ads might look like in the wild. So what are we looking at here, Kenton, on the left?
Yeah, so on the left, we'll have some examples of how things might look like on Amazon. So these are going to be featuring like a video or a display asset. I think the ones that are showcasing here would be video assets on Amazon, but you can see display assets in these same placements. And this could be an example. This still shot could be an example of what those might look like. We could also see these off of Amazon in similar placement types. And that top right corner, that's a streaming TV asset. So that's one of the great features about streaming TV is the ability to create overlays that Amazon has built into the console. So you'll upload that video like we see in the middle of the screen. And then by entering our ASIN, Amazon will pull in Amazon branding, your review count, your product image, and then we'll have the ability to enter headlines on the overlay all within the DSP console to really drive some of that additional trust around our product by showcasing that Amazon branding and pushing people, with that extra knowledge around our product.
Awesome. And then, I think one of the things that we want to call out here, especially as it relates to the responsive e-commerce creatives that Amazon offers in the bottom right corner here, similar to the benefits of using custom imagery with your brand's logo, your brand's colors, your fonts, and that can instill a sense of confidence with users and shoppers who are familiar with your brand. These dynamic ads by Amazon do the same thing with Amazon's branding. So it's the familiar Shop Now button, familiar add to cart colors, the Prime logo. That's why they're especially useful in the purchase stage of the funnel. It inspires customers and instills that trust in them to make the purchase as they are very familiar with Amazon. So now that we've covered the goals and the creatives, let's get into the specific settings that are available when you're creating a DSP order.
For sure, yeah. So when we're starting off and creating our DSP orders, the first thing that Amazon's going to ask us is what are our goals for optimization? So this is why we had that KPI slide a little bit earlier, is it's really important before you get into creating your strategy and building out your orders to determine what are my goals for this campaign or this order. And so when you first get in the console, you'll need to select what is my goal between awareness, consideration, and conversion for this specific order. And that'll vary based off of the targeting and creative assets you plan to use. So you'll be able to pick between the three, and then you'll also be able to click a KPI target. So this KPI target is, again, going to be what you want the Amazon system to optimize towards. We'll get into it a little bit more later, but the Amazon DSP system is very automated when it comes to optimizations. You have the ability to automate your budget optimization between line items, between inventories, between creatives. And so the levers you select here are going to be what Amazon's console is looking at when it's going through to make those optimizations between those different segments. So it's important to make sure that you think about this before you get into the process of building this out, and that you have this aligned with your true goals for the campaign. When we're thinking about best practices here, for conversion, we'd probably want to look at something like ROAS or total ROAS. When we're thinking about consideration, we probably want to look at detailed page view rate or click-through rate. And when we're looking at awareness, we'll probably just look at our total reach. You'll also notice on here a KPI target segment. At the moment, this will be an area where we can enter a target based off of the KPI we select. So in this example, we selected DPPR, and we'll be able to select a DPPR target. At this time, that is purely for reporting and informational. So this will show up on your Amazon DSP console. You'll be able to compare it with your actual metric to see how you're trending against your goal. But it's not going to change how the system optimizes at this time. So you do have the option to not set it. But we've heard that there's potential in the future for Amazon to work this into their full optimizations as well.
Awesome. And these optimizations are making tons of decisions every single second that you are running DSP campaigns. We just got a question from the audience. Considering the vast amount of data Amazon DSP handles if it were a supercomputer, what would its processing power be in comparison to traditional supercomputers? Great question. I can't answer that with any degree of accuracy. What I can say is that Amazon claims that they're making, I think, billions of or hundreds of billions of optimizations with DSP every minute or something ridiculous.
Well, I'm sure
So
it's crazy. Yeah.
yeah, between all of these goals that you're setting here and the responsive e-commerce ads changing the CTAs and the look and feel of your ads in real time, it is quite complex. All right, so now that you've set your goal and your KPIs for DSP, there's a lot more settings you have to choose from here. Kenton, can you walk us through what each of these are and how they will affect the setup and structure of your campaigns?
Totally. So in this first section, we'll be kind of breaking things down by supply sources, device types, and then our product grouping. And so on the right side of the screen, we'll see our inventory, otherwise known as supply sources. And this will be where we're targeting the different type of placements that we want to go after for our specific line items. This will be looking at on the line items section. And so in that top section, you'll see the options to choose Amazon, Amazon Publisher direct or third-party exchanges. So Amazon is obviously going to be on Amazon sources. This will include the Amazon app, the Amazon website, as well as IMDD and Alexa sources, which are Amazon owned and operated. And so really those will be your most lower funnel targetings where you're really trying to drive conversions. Those will be great places to put those. But you can put your consideration assets there as well, just to test how the performance kind of differs.
And it's worth probably noting that, between the three different options of supply sources, they're going to have different performance, as you mentioned. They're also going to have different cost, right, Kenton?
Totally, yeah. So Amazon will probably have the highest cost here just because the inventory is a little more limited. Most of these are going to be on the product page or maybe on the Amazon homepage, versus the vast inventory we're going to see from an APS or a third-party exchange source. And also, there's just heavier competition for those Amazon supply sources. We know that it's a premium inventory. People are actively shopping when we're showcasing to them here, so we're going to expect our cost to be a little bit higher there.
Makes sense.
Totally. And then we'll get into those bottom two, which are Amazon Publisher Select and third-party exchanges. So these are going to be agreements that Amazon has with third-party websites, such as like weather.com, for example, to showcase your assets on those sites. And so these are always great to select, especially for those more consideration funnel assets where you're trying to hit people before their shopping journey. Those are great assets to look at. When you're building out your orders and your line items, I would always recommend separating out by these different inventory types. Maybe I have one line item for on Amazon inventories and one line item for off Amazon inventories, just because like we talked about, those costs are going to be different. And so that'll allow you to kind of differentiate between the two and better optimize as we get a little farther down the system.
Yeah, very important. It's similar to how you might if you were running sponsored ads, you might have your campaign with all of your products in it, but you might have different ad groups for branded keywords versus non-branded keywords. You want to treat this similarly, where you expect different performance across supply sources and device types, create those additional line items. Yes, it adds more upfront work to your setup, but it will pay dividends in the end when you have that better reporting and visibility into how things are running.
Totally. And like you mentioned, I think it's the same thing for those device types. So we'll think about things like, desktop versus mobile. We'll want to have the ability to optimize between those two. And then product groups, like you mentioned. So maybe I have, this group of ASINs versus a separate group of ASINs. We might want to separate those out as well, just like you would on sponsored ads.
Awesome. So continuing down here, there's even more line item settings that you have to set when you're creating a campaign. Are these at the line item or the order level, Ken?
Yeah, there's going to depend for some of these. Some of them are going to be at both. Some of them will only be at one. So for budget settings, we'll really focus on the line item level. There is some budgets that will set at the order level, but really the settings we're calling out here are more at the line item level. So if we see those images on the right side of the screen, we'll see that line item budget section. So as we mentioned earlier, Amazon's DSP system is very automated when it comes to these type of optimizations. And so that first section called automate budget allocation will be automatically selected. And what that's going to do is take the overall budget that you set at the order level and optimize it between all the different line items, the supply sources, the creatives that you have set up within that order. So that'll be defaultly selected. I always recommend continuing to use that automated budget allocations, but you do have the ability to change that to a manual budget allocation and set what that daily or monthly cap might look like for that line item specifically, as you'll see by that budget cap section right underneath there. The pacing and catch-up boost section. So within the pacing section, you'll be able to see we have two options to either pace even or pace ahead. Pace ahead is just going to front load your budget that you set. It's not going to overspend it. It's still going to remain within the budget constraints you have set for, say, the month or the day, but it might just move it towards the start, especially at that month segment. So this may be come into play when you have a tentpole event, right? If I know I have Prime Day halfway through the month, maybe I want to front load my budget so that I'm spending more in the lead up than I am in the lead out because maybe that fits my brand strategy. So that's something that Amazon gives us built into the system to kind of go with from square one. And we also have the catch-up boost, which kind of does the inverse of that. Not necessarily backloading the campaign, but the catch-up boost. Say you have, an order that's under delivering in the first half of the month, or you have an increase in your budget or something like that. The catch-up boost will give you different multipliers that you can select with on how you want to increase your daily budgets based off of your spend level relative to your monthly budget. So if you're pacing behind, this can be a great way to help you catch up, and can be something that you set, from the jump at a low multiple, just to ensure that you're not seeing any underspend as you go throughout the month.
Awesome.
Yeah, that bottom section is going to be the frequency caps. So what frequency caps are going to do are going to limit the amount of times that someone can see your order or your line item on a daily or hourly basis. I could set this for a certain number of hours, a certain number of days. I could say, 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 hours as well. And we're going to, again, this is going to be something that's on the order and line item level. So we're going to set this once on the order level, which is going to say, for all the line items within this order, this is the maximum amount of time someone could see this. So maybe we'll set it for 7 times in one day, just to make sure we're not overexposing. And then on that line item level, that's going to set the amount of time someone can see that specific line item. So when we're breaking out our line items by different supply sources or different device types, this will ensure that if someone is getting to that full 7 times, they're at least seeing that my ad in different placements. Maybe they're seeing it once on Amazon on their desktop, and then once on the Amazon app, and then once off of Amazon on the mobile web. And so you kind of get a variety of those placements. And so we definitely would want to set a lower frequency cap on the line item level, but I think they're really important to set on both sides of things, really to just make sure we're not overexposing to our customers, we're getting in new customers, and getting the full reach that we can for our budget.
Yeah, and I know we'll get into this more later on, but this is also an area where AMC has an advantage if you're able to, or you wanted to create total frequency caps. You'll see that's not really an option here within DSP. You can choose to set frequency caps daily or hourly, but if somebody, let's say you had 7 per day, that's your frequency cap. Somebody could be exposed to that ad 7 times every day, and of course, over a month, that's 200 exposures, give or take. And so both being able to run a query within AMC to analyze your cost per acquisition by frequency to see, hey, am I overexposing shoppers and spending a lot more to acquire customers who've already been exposed to my ad 15 times? And then also using that to create an audience that you can exclude so that you can have true total frequency caps is a huge benefit if you are considering running DSP.
Totally. Yeah, and I think as we get a little bit farther down here, we'll get into the bidding section. And so on top of that, I think, like we mentioned, AMC is great for those frequency caps, but as we get into the bidding section, frequency caps and bidding are going to be something that we think about as our 2 biggest levers of manual optimization. So these are going to be the 2 areas that Amazon is not necessarily automatically optimizing. And so our base bid is going to be where we set in as, this is the minimum amount that we want to have our system bid at when we're going after these different placements. And these can range depending on the audience you're going at. The more niche your audience, the more expensive your CPM is going to be, or the more niche your inventory. For example, if I was just going after Amazon.com with a 14-day look back for a few ASINs, my audience is probably pretty small for that, so my cost is probably going to get driven up. Versus if I was going after everyone between the ages of 18 and 35 on any inventory source, I could probably have a pretty low CPM. The other thing to keep in mind when we're setting up these base bids is, while maybe I can win this with $1 CPM, I could win placements and get my spend and hit my delivery caps. It might not put me in the most premium inventories, right? So this is going to work on, the first placements are going to go out to the people who are bidding the highest. So those premium placements that other brands might be bidding on are going to go out to those highest bidders. And while we might still get some spend, we're going to get what's left over after that. So we'll probably still see some performance, but I have seen it in the past where even with the same order setting a base bid at $1 versus $4 can have an impact in the overall performance of the campaign. So I would generally recommend starting this around $4, and if you see, under delivery or over delivery, adjusting it as needed. You also want to set a maximum average CPM. I would generally recommend setting this about 50% higher than your base bid. If you don't set this, I believe it gets set at 2 times your base bid. So if I have a $4 base bid, this will be set at $8. And so we'll want to set this somewhere a little bit lower so that we're, staying within a manageable range when we're thinking about our CPMs.
Yeah, I love how it says optional under the maximum average.
Right? I don't think they want us to set it, but
You should definitely put something in there. And Kenton's recommendation is to keep that about 50% higher than your base bid. We have a question here about frequency caps, Kenton. Is it advisable to keep a higher frequency cap? What do you think?
I mean, I think it can depend on what your goal is here. I would always keep it a little bit lower, really for the main goal being that the only difference a higher frequency cap is going to make, while it may allow you to spend more, if the higher spend is coming with a higher frequency cap, you're probably just showing to those same customers over and over again. And so you're not really going to get a unique reach. And so like Ryan was mentioning, if we set this at even 7 times a day, over the course of a month, someone's seeing this over 200 times potentially, which if they're not converting within those 200 times, they're probably not going to convert. And so I think this can, go off of your brand's data. If you see that maybe I have it takes more interactions for my customer to purchase, which could be something you could get into by using AMC. Then you could set that a little higher. But if you're seeing that, if it's just to try to get that delivery rates up, I would probably err on the side of launching a different strategy, maybe including additional audiences or additional supply sources to try to get your spend a little bit higher, versus trying to, just showcase to the same customers again.
Yeah, that makes sense. It all depends on the goal, but if to your point, Ken, if the increasing your frequency cap, if that's coming out of a place of wanting to spend more, it might be better to actually make other changes in order to spend more and reach new customers, unless you have other data which you can get through AMC that suggests that you need to hit those customers with
Totally.
more ads in order for them to convert. But in many cases, we've seen that starting at 7 a day is a good place to start. And even at a pretty low frequency cap of 7 times per day, you can get into situations where you're way overexposing certain customers. Might not be 100% of your spend, but some portion of that spend is going to be going to a segment of users who have been exposed many, many times and have a very low likelihood of converting.
Totally. And I think that's why, those frequency caps and base bids are the two areas we want to have a, high manual oversight over, checking this on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to see, okay, how much am I exposing to my customers? How is my performance differing? And those are the two levers that we really have to say, how can we improve our return here? How can we improve our detailed page view rate? I've definitely seen it in the past by, lowering frequency caps, seeing a large increase in return, and maybe that lowers our ability to spend, but it probably doesn't hurt our sales. And so we're able to push those dollars somewhere else that may help us grow our overall funnel.
So takeaway here before we move on is definitely to, if you're running DSP campaigns right now, check your frequency caps, ensure that you have them set on both the order and line item level. And if you're curious and you have access to AMC, you should definitely consider running a query that compares cost per acquisition or purchase rate by frequency. And that can show you how much of that budget is going to users who have been overexposed to ads potentially, and what that drop off in purchase rate might be. And if you see that there's an opportunity to exclude those customers, you can do so by creating an AMC audience. We covered this in a previous webinar, so if you'd like to learn more, don't hesitate to reach out or search on our website to find it. Last thing on this page is tracked products. Now, we don't have this shown in the screenshot here, but this is really important, Kenton. What does tracked products do?
Yeah, so tracked products are going to be something we set on the order level. And what this is going to differentiate between is your ROAS and total ROAS. For an example, we have that same lever for each metric. So total detail page view rate versus detail page view rate. The difference between those being is your total for each of these metrics is going to showcase how someone interacts with your brand across all of your different ASINs that you showcase. So if I have 100 ASINs in my catalog, and say I'm showcasing, one product group, but someone purchases another product group, that purchase will still count towards my total ROAS. The tracked products are going to be what determines my regular ROAS or my regular detail page view rate or anything along those other lines. And so you'll want to enter in a group of ASINs here that are what you are, that go along with the goal that you have for that campaign, the goal products that you're focusing on for that campaign. And this could be a single ASIN, this could be a variation of ASINs depending on your goals and your, how your brand is catalog is set up. And then, these are definitely both valuable metrics. If your goal with DSP is to drive top line sales or top line engagement, then the total metrics might be the best way to look at the optimization for you. But if you have, goals to sell specific products or specific product groups, then you'd want to look at those regular tracked metrics. And so this again is another place to keep in mind when we're thinking about setting those optimization levers, like we talked about earlier when setting up our orders on the DSP console, because we'll have the option to choose between things like ROAS and total ROAS. And so we'll want to make sure we have this in mind before we kind of go into setting up those orders as well.
That's right. So think about tracked products as similar to same SKU attributed sales in sponsored ads, right? Your sponsored ads metrics, when you're looking at sales, are going to show by default your brand halo sales. So sales from that product that was being advertised and any other products within your brand. That would be the equivalent of what they call TROAS on DSP, which is sales from any product across your brand. Whereas DSP allows you to actually upload a specific set of ASINs. They can be the ones featured in the ad or not, but you have control over that. So you can measure sales and metrics for those products specifically as well as the total Halo sales. So we've talked a little bit about bids, frequency caps, budgets. Budgeting is a pretty different process with DSP. Starting with something called campaign flights. Can you walk us through how budgeting works today in DSP, Kenton?
Yeah, so budgeting can kind of be set in two different ways on DSP. We'll be able to set both a monthly and a daily cap, and we can have both work together at the same time, which is a little bit different than we might see on sponsored ads, where you're probably just setting that daily budget. And what the system's going to do here is it's going to optimize towards that monthly budget first. So it's going to say, okay, how are we spending towards this? It's going to be pacing towards that monthly budget by splitting up the budget on a daily basis. But then you'll also have the ability to set that daily cap to say, okay, maybe, while the system is optimizing to spend an even amount on a daily basis, maybe there are days that fluctuate. And so that daily cap can be kind of a maintenance threshold to set as a second lever of success in there as well. DSP is also going to give us this chart that you see on the right side of the screen to help us look into our pacing. So we'll see things like delivery rate and then our spend level versus our projected spend for the month. And we can compare that to our flight budget. Delivery rates, we might see vary between 95 to 100% for campaigns that are probably going to spend through their whole budget. That's definitely the healthy place to be. If you start seeing that the delivery is a little bit higher, which you might see depending on, how you're pacing throughout the month, you might see that some days overspend a little bit, some days underspend a little bit. And so your delivery rate could be over that 100% mark. And if it is, maybe you want to go through and lower your frequency caps or lower your bids. But we also could see this trickle down. Maybe my audience isn't big enough. Maybe my frequency caps are too low, maybe my base bids are too low and my delivery rate drops lower, maybe around that 90% mark or even lower than that. And as I start getting below that 90% mark, that's when I really want to start thinking about making optimizations around that. And again, that could look like adding additional audiences or supply sources, raising my frequency caps, raising my bids. If I'm having to do excessive measurements in those to where it's not really meeting what my initial strategy is, maybe I need to take some of the budget from that campaign and dabble in some other strategies, maybe move a little bit up the funnel to try to drive some additional traffic down to my lower funnel campaigns.
Yeah, and in my experience, you might see that for example, your retargeting campaigns can be under delivering significantly if you have a much higher budget than the size of your audience that's in that retargeting campaign. So it really does depend on the audience that you're going after and all of the other factors like bids and frequency caps that Kenton mentioned. But if you see that your delivery rate is very low, you need to go back to the drawing board and figure out, are there changes that I can make to increase that, or do I simply need to move that budget elsewhere? All right, let's move on to something really interesting. We're going to talk about the DSP audiences that are available. So initial audiences, and we're going to go through a couple of examples here. So what are we looking at here, Kenton?
Yeah, for sure. So Amazon's going to give us a lot of different audience selections out of the box. As you see on the right side of the screen, these can range from fairly niche audiences, like getting down into people who are into video game strategy, to more broader audiences, like just thinking about people who are interested in video games in general. These can kind of be broken down into four main segments, thinking about lifestyle, in-market, life event, demographic audiences. And then on top of this, we'll have the ability to create custom audiences around product views or product purchases that can be really good for those lower funnel campaigns. When we're working within this, the best place I would recommend to start is within an in-market or a lifestyle audience that you might have a high overlap with. If I'm selling specific video games, maybe I'm selling indie video game like we have in this example over here. Maybe I'd want to target the in-market for video games, the lifestyle for video games for the indie category, and then maybe I'll use a custom audience focused on my product page viewers, and I can create different points throughout the funnel for that initial strategy. If you have other research for your brand, knowing you have high overlap with certain demographics or things like that, you can definitely start with this from the beginning. But without that data, it might be hard to know where you have highest affinity with some of your customers from the jump. But what Amazon does is it gives us some great data after we start running our DSP strategies. So maybe 30 days in, we'll want to go and review our audiences, and they'll provide us a couple different ways to do this. First will be the overlap reports. So we'll be able to pull a report from the DSP console, which will tell us how our brand is performing against every audience that Amazon offers, which is thousands of audiences, based off of our overlap with those segments. So it'll be looking at customers that are in the segments we are targeting, as well as the customers that are in those segments that we aren't targeting, and tell us how we might perform against those. And that can be a great place to identify opportunity audiences for us to look for a little bit in the future. They'll also offer affinity across different audiences. So I can go into a specific audience, say the in-market for video games, and see which other audiences have the highest overlap with that specific audience if I'm seeing that I have high performance against that audience, to find some other opportunity audiences. And then the final place we'll be able to look at this is AMC. So we'll be able to see how are we performing against different audiences, what could be some opportunities. So AMC is definitely a great way to complement DSP when we're thinking about audience research.
Yeah. And what we wanted to show here with these screenshots too is just the level of sophistication that you're able to get into. You can see the audience builder has, and or statements. You can have multiple operators, multiple groups of audiences as well. There's inclusion and exclusion. So you can get extremely specific and granular with how you're building these audiences that you want to target or not target. And as Kenton mentioned, Amazon has a ton of very specific in-market audiences for you here. Ken, we have a question from the audience. There are DSP-specific AMC reports which give geolocation and device type data. Is there a way to target those audiences alone?
Yes, totally. So we will be able to actually target geographic regions out of the box on DSP. So that is a targeting ability we'll have when we're thinking about just setting up our DSP orders, but we definitely can pull AMC reports around geographic data as well. And any AMC report we can pull, we can typically build an audience off of. So if we wanted to be more, drilled down and use AMC to pull our geographic targetings, we can certainly do that as well, but it is built into the DSP console. And then device types, we'll be able to filter that on our line item level. So we'll be able to say, okay, I want to target someone who's on mobile web or mobile app. Amazon does have out of the box audiences for more specific devices, like if they're using an iPhone versus a Samsung phone, there is audiences that are provided for that straight in the console. And then if that is data that, again, we can get through AMC, then we'll be able to create audiences off of it as well, targeting people who are falling within those segments, but they'll have to be people who have already engaged with our ad. We won't get access to the full Amazon suite of audiences. And so that's where Amazon's built-in audiences for both geographic and device types could be more beneficial. But we definitely have options on both of those levers.
Awesome. Anything else on this slide, Ken, before we move on?
No, I think that covers it.
Great. So beyond the out-of-the-box audiences, Amazon has a feature called contextual targeting. What does contextual targeting do, and how does it differ from, say, in-market?
Totally. So yeah, contextual targeting is just going to be another targeting option that we have when we're creating our line items. And this is kind of come down into 3 different segments. So we'll be able to look at categories, products, and related products. The main difference here versus an in-market audience is going to be that we're targeting these shoppers in real time as they're shopping on Amazon. So think about it like you might see a sponsored display ad going after a certain category. It's going to work pretty similarly to that. As you can see in that screenshot on the right, we'll be able to get very granular with what we're looking at here. As you see, for example, we have Xbox Series X cases in storage versus when we were looking at, in market audiences, we just had video games, for an example. And so this can kind of allow us to have a strategy across multiple different points. Maybe I wanted to go after a more consideration approach, and I just want to look at video games, and that'll allow me to kind of get a broader reach, thinking about engagement with my ad. But maybe I'm wanting to think about more conversions and go after people who are very, in a very niche product category, and kind of focus on what makes my product unique within my assets. I might look at some of those more niche audiences with the hopes of driving some return from those as well. So several different approaches you can take with these. It's really great that it's going to be targeting people as they're shopping on Amazon, so we know that these are high value shoppers with intent to purchase. And what makes this great when we're thinking about the difference versus sponsored display is we'll have the ability to still layer on those other audiences. So we can layer on specific device types. We could layer on exclusion audiences, maybe saying, I want to not target anyone who's viewed my brand before to make sure these are all new to brand customers. And so we'll really have a lot of different levers that we can pull here when thinking about the performance. And we can take it a step lower. Like we mentioned, we'll have the ability to do this as products as well. So I could enter specific competitor ASINs and say, okay, maybe I know I have a high affinity with these competitors. I want to start going after these competitors more. So again, somewhere like a sponsored display asset, I'm going to showcase on those competitor pages as people are shopping them in real time, but I'll still have the ability to layer on those negative audiences as well. So giving us those extra levers to pull that we don't have on the sponsored ad side of things.
Yeah, and I think this is a great example of how DSP is definitely not a gimmick and definitely not something that's, upper funnel only in terms of the level of specificity and control that you have to reach shoppers exactly where they're shopping, whether you're using in-market lifestyle audiences that were created by Amazon, whether you're using contextual targeting to reach them in real time as they're browsing certain categories or products on Amazon. That combined with the power of demographic filters, filters on supply sources and device types, and the ability to use AMC audiences to even control that experience even further. DSP is extremely powerful and can be used for a number of different strategies. Now, I do want to just clarify, we've been talking about AMC quite a bit. If you're curious about how to get an AMC instance created, it does need to be done by Amazon. You are required to have some amount of DSP spend. There is no minimum amount required, but you do need to have some amount of DSP spend to qualify for an instance. So if you need help getting in touch with the right team at Amazon, Intentwise can help you do that for free. It's a free process to get an AMC instance created. So don't hesitate to reach out, Ryan@intentwise.com if you need help with that. So moving on, contextual targeting is definitely a great example of high ROAS strategies. What are some other examples that you've seen drive high ROAS, Kenton?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is where we're going to be thinking about those custom audiences like we've talked about. So this is going to start on those remarketing or retargeting segments. Sometimes these are going to be used interchangeably, but I like to think about remarketing as targeting people who have purchased from your brand in the past. So when we were talking about that loyalty phase earlier, driving cross-sell of complementary products, driving subscribe and saved, maybe driving, people to upsell who may have purchased from you a year ago, maybe they need to repurchase, things along those lines. So we can go after targeting past purchases of our brand that we know have that high affinity are likely to purchase from us again. And then we also have retargeting, which is targeting people who have viewed our product page. But again, we can use those negative audiences and look at people who haven't purchased from us in the past, which is really going to help us drive up that performance. With the goal here being driving those purchases from people that we know have a familiarity with our brand already. And then lastly, we can also create this for brand store retargeting. So we're going to know that these shoppers have even higher intent with our brand because not only have they visited our product page, but they've gone a step farther and visited our brand store. And so we have the option to either retarget them and send them back to the brand store, send them to specific product pages that we're wanting to push. And so several different options we can do there, but those are definitely high value shoppers that we can see drive high ROAS, especially as we see brand stores becoming more and more valuable for telling your brand story and driving those higher value purchases.
Awesome. Now let's talk through some awareness strategies. Obviously, we've covered the whole funnel here in terms of what's possible. I think you can probably imagine whether you're running DSP today or not, the ways that these audiences would be helpful, but still might be a little bit fuzzy on how you should be measuring success, particularly in the awareness stage of the funnel. And Ken, I know you've said this before, but even though DSP can generate very high ROAS by doing retargeting and some of these contextual plays, it is still important to make sure that you're refilling the funnel with awareness and consideration as well. So when you're running awareness campaigns, what are the goals or KPIs that you look at?
For sure. I think it's definitely going to differ, and we're going to be thinking more along lines of those engagement or reach metrics, like we talked about a little bit earlier. And I think, like you're mentioning, it's important to kind of think about running both of these alongside each other. We'll see that as we run more high ROAS strategies, we might start taking away from our funnel that we might have organically or from our sponsored ads. And so those awareness strategies are going to fill up that funnel. But again, on the inverse, if we only ran awareness strategies, we might not see that ROAS performance. So it's good to kind of have a balance between these two. But when we are thinking about awareness strategies, these are going to be going after those in-market audiences, those lifestyle audiences, and that awareness or consideration funnel of things. Starting off, we'll have DSP video, like we talked about before. Again, we can, make these creatives to both tell our brand story, call out specific product features, things along those lines, really with a goal to drive product education in some premium video placements, both on and off of Amazon, to increase that brand consideration. So here, what we want to be looking at things like detailed page view rate, click-through rate, because these are going to be showing on devices. So we'll be able to have those click-throughs, and then we're not going to expect to see ROAS be as strong here. But we'll also have display assets, which are going to be those custom uploaded creatives that we'll want to focus on calling out product features, really focusing on going after those in-market audiences here, more in that consideration phase of the channel. And so we'll be able to really drive again some of that additional product consideration here as we move people down into that purchase funnel. So this can be a great way to target those in-aisle shoppers. Thinking again about DPVR, CTR, and then our cost per detailed page view rate, which will be a great metric that we can get from Amazon to see how much are we spending for a detailed page view in comparison to what we're spending in our lower funnel campaigns or on sponsored ads or things like that. Historically, from what I've seen for both videos and display assets going after those in-aisle shoppers, we see these costs be pretty low, and so they're a great way to drive that kind of larger windows of consideration for your brand. And then as we get a little higher up the funnel, we'll have streaming TV. So like we talked about before, this is going to be more of an awareness play going after a lifestyle audience or demographic audience. And these are going to be really premium placements. We have access to things like Twitch and Prime Video, as well as a range of third-party sources that Amazon has partnerships with the idea here to drive brand awareness through these video placements, with the measures of success kind of be looking at our overall branded searches. Maybe Apple will search query report for the week before I start my streaming TV asset, compare it to a couple weeks into running that streaming TV asset, and I see that I've seen an increase in my brand query score. And so I know that's probably something that's driving it. AMC will be also a great way that we can kind of get an insight into our branded search lift. We'll also be able to look at detailed page view rate. This won't likely be as high because we're probably going to have some attribution gap here. Maybe someone's watching this on their TV screen and they are signed into a different account than they are on their phone. And so that might cause some gap in attribution, which is again a place AMC can come in to help, or looking at those overarching metrics like branded searches or total sessions. Those are some great metrics to think about when we're thinking about measuring success for streaming TV.
Kenton, how trustworthy is the branded searches metric from DSP?
Yeah, I think it can vary. I think the one difficulty that I've seen with it is that you're not able to enter what search terms you want to look at when we're doing this directly in DSP. That's somewhere we can get a little bit different when we're thinking about things like AMC that can help us pull those metrics a little bit, more specifically. But if we had specific terms that maybe the DSP console weren't pulling in, that could affect our ability to look at branded searches directly on the console. And again, we might have an attribution gap between accounts on someone's TV versus their phone or desktop. And so that could cause a gap there as well. And so really, I would think about looking at things from an overarching metric and seeing, how is this feeding into my overarching strategy? Because if it is driving more traffic and more branded searches and things along those lines, it's probably also improving your organic rank and improving, your sponsored placements and things along those lines, which, while they're not directly attributed to that streaming TV asset, it is still a positive effect that streaming TV had on your overarching brand. And it's something they would continue to have if you continue to run it.
Yeah, it sounds like streaming TV is probably one of the toughest at the moment to trace back and directly attribute to actual benefits on your product. So being open-minded and having a lot of different metrics that you're looking at relative to the amount you're spending compared to your sales is a good way to measure streaming TV campaigns. And I just want to emphasize the point about branded searches is that DSP does not allow you to define what your brand terms are. And so it's a little bit of a black box in terms of how they count that. Let's say, for example, you're Canon and you sell Canon PowerShot cameras. Canon would obviously be a branded keyword, but so would PowerShot. And if somebody's searching PowerShot, does Amazon consider that to be a branded search? The answer is we don't know. We don't have control over that. So you could use AMC to measure portions of that, but it is a little bit of a black box and should not be the only metric you rely on. All right, so let's get more specific here about three clear ways that AMC insights make DSP better. And I think this is really important because, especially with the maybe gaps in attribution or just a little bit of unclear ways that DSP is attributed back to your business, how does AMC help solve that gap?
Totally. So I think one thing we've talked a lot about is that sales attribution. So we're going to see, since Amazon has that last touch attribution model, that one thing that becomes difficult with DSP, especially in those awareness plays, is seeing the full effect that they have on your top line sales. Obviously, I can go in and look what's my overall increase in top line sales, but I might not see that those things are directly attributed to those DSP orders. So through AMC queries such as path to purchase or multi-touch attribution, first touch attribution, things along those lines, I'll be able to see, um, you know, the paths that had the highest, between my assets that had the highest path to conversion or drove the most conversion. I'll be able to see how many of my DSP assets for the first touch point in someone that ended up in a conversion. So this will really allow me to prove the value of not only everyone who viewed my DSP ads and how much that, increased my conversion, but also how are my DSP ads working in, being at first touch point and driving people to start thinking about converting from my brand. So AMC is great in proving the value there, as
Question.
well as
Sorry, real quick question for you on sales attribution with AMC. AMC allows you to have different attribution models as well. Is there a best practice that you would recommend? Do you recommend changing the attribution model or just sticking with the default, but using AMC as the means to actually track it?
yeah, I would just stick with the default attribution model. I think AMC is going to be the best key in tracking this for us to really get that full attribution across different touch points. We'll be able to pull in different reports like the first touch, the last touch, the multi-touch to see how different variations of things and different variations of paths have a positive or negative effect within both DSP and sponsored ads.
Got it. Thank you.
For sure, yeah. And then as we get a little bit further down, we'll have some other audience or some other reports that we can pull as well that are great for proving the value of DSP. So we'll be able to look at things like new to brand customers. One thing I've heard a lot in the past is that when we're running retargeting, we might see that DSP starts to cannibalize organic sales or sponsored ad sales. And so new to brand customers will be able to prove whether that is happening or not, to either say, okay, that's not something I need to worry about, or if it is happening, what are some optimizations I can make to make sure that I am driving new customers from my DSP orders. And they'll also be able to prove lifetime value. So if I have, that remarketing segments like I was looking at before, maybe I'm looking at past purchasers trying to drive subscribe and saves or complementary product purchases, then I'll be able to look at lifetime value to really get an idea of how is DSP impacting, both on an individual path or from an individual order, how is it impacting the overall average order value, the overall lifetime value of a specific customer for my brand.
Definitely. And, I think all of these are great examples of how you should use AMC to, again, just ensure that the strategy you're implementing with DSP is effective at reaching your goals. And so if you've ever had concerns that any of these things are happening, that you're not bringing in new to brand customers, that your sales are not being attributed properly, or that you don't know the lifetime value, when you're running DSP, AMC will help you solve those issues without a doubt. And there are two ways to think about AMC as it relates particularly to working with DSP. There's insights, what we call insights, which would be examples like this, where you can go and query specific information out of your campaigns. And then there's audiences, which you can use to obviously target certain shoppers or groups of shoppers or exclude them. So let me run through a couple of examples of AMC audiences that can be very helpful in DSP, even if you're not doing anything super crazy, you don't have a super high amount of spend, these could still be valuable to you. So first is setting total frequency caps. We covered this a little bit earlier. DSP by default only gives you the ability to set a daily or hourly frequency cap. With AMC, you could build a group of shoppers who have been exposed to your ad X number of times. You can decide how many that should be over a total time period and exclude them from receiving any other further ad impressions. So you could say, hey, I don't want to show anybody my ad after they've seen it 10 times from any campaign within DSP. You could even include sponsored ads there. Hey, if they've seen 15 of my ads from any ad type, don't show them anymore. You can also target shoppers who searched your brand name specifically or any other specific keywords you input. As we mentioned, it's a little bit of a black box on DSP in terms of what branded searches are, but with AMC, you can dictate any specific keyword. And if the customer searched that keyword and was exposed to your ad, you can build an audience of them and remarket towards those customers, which could be very helpful. For example, if you know that customers are searching for digital cameras, using the Canon example from before, you would be able to build an audience of them and serve ads directly to them. Also, you have shoppers who add to cart or add to list. So these are pretty standard like cart abandonment audiences that you might see on your D2C site or Shopify. You have the ability to basically take people who've added your product to cart and not purchased, or added to a list and retarget them. And then the last two here would be target shoppers who've never seen an ad from you before. This is pretty interesting. So, if you really want to go after net new customers, this is an option with with AMC and DSP combined. You can create that audience of people who've never seen an ad from you before, load it up in DSP, and target them with the correct supply sources that you'd like. And then lastly, you can target shoppers by CLV. So this could be very helpful for loyalty campaigns. Let's say you sell a variety of like replenishable items, or maybe video games, whatever the case may be. And you want to segment your shoppers by the ones that have purchased repeatedly from you for a long time, and the ones that maybe are not quite there yet, only bought from you once or twice. You want to run different ads to those different groups of shoppers, or maybe you want to exclude one group from receiving ads at all. That is possible with AMC. You can group them by their lifetime value or their long-term value and target them differently. All right, that was a whirlwind obsession. In the last 60 seconds here, let's go through our takeaways. Kenton, do you want to run through this list and just leave us with the 4 things that we should take away from today's session?
Totally. So yeah, I think first, when we're going into setting up a DSP campaign, it's important to, before we get into it, determine what the goal for our campaign is going to be. Are we trying to drive sales? We're trying to drive awareness. But I think it's equally as important to make sure that we are setting up campaigns that accomplish both goals. So we make sure that we're not always only getting those conversions, but we're also refilling our funnel from the top as well. So equally as important, but I think it's important to determine what are my goals for each campaign I'm setting up. When you're setting up these campaigns, take your time when setting them up. It can be time consuming to set up DSP campaigns because we're going to want to have those granular structures by building different line items on the supply source level or the device type level. But that's going to make those optimizations even easier as you get down the, further down the process. And really where DSP comes in, it's going to be a large lift at that initial setup. But when we have that set up in place and alongside the automated optimizations that the DSP console makes, the ongoing time commitment that it's going to take to optimize is going to be a lot lower than we might see on sponsored ads or something like that. Optimize your audiences using the overlap reports as you get further in the time. So once you get a month in, let's go look at your data and let's pull overlap reports for both your total data as well as audiences you're seeing success with, to see how you might be able to optimize your audiences going forward. And then fourth and finally, utilizing AMC is allows you to not only get the most accurate measurement for your campaigns, with the last touch attribution model, but also build audiences that help you be even more successful, drive even more purchases. And so AMC plus and DSP together really provides the biggest value on both sides of things and can help you drive that success for your brand.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Kenton for being here today. Thank you to our audience who stuck with us. We have a few questions left in the chat that I want to try to get through before we end today's session. Of course, if you have to jump, no worries. There are a few questions in here. So how many default queries are available in AMC? That is a good question. Basically, I think there's about 70 or 80 what Amazon calls instructional queries that are available right now in AMC that you can copy and paste and use. Instructional queries, though, are not going to be specific to your business needs. They're generally pretty basic. However, they might help you with understanding a specific metric or something along those lines. In Intentwise's AMC solution called Intentwise Explore, we have the instructional queries, but we also have dozens of queries that were written by our team. However, the way that we think AMC is best utilized is when you have custom queries that are written to address your specific business needs and produce the outputs that you're looking for. So it's always best to work with a SQL expert, an AMC expert who has the resources and the ability to write custom queries. That will end up with the best result. We have a white paper that was recently published on AMC where we get into all of the reasons why instructional queries might not be enough. We also show you how to use them and get into some examples of uploading first-party data into AMC as well. So if you haven't seen it already, I highly recommend you check out that white paper for more information on AMC. Let's see here. Is there a way to upload Google Ads and metadata into AMC? Possibly. So the way that first-party data uploads into AMC work is Amazon will try to match user information from your first-party upload to what they have on file for their customers as well. So things like email address, name, address, there's a few other fields in their zip code, a bunch of other things that if you're able to get that from Google Ads and metadata, then you could upload that into AMC and Amazon might be able to match it. However, my guess is that you're not going to get that level of user specificity from Google Ads. You would probably be able to do so from Shopify, for example, where if you have their information, you can upload it. It's completely encrypted and hashed through a safe, privacy-safe process. So AMC is not going to risk exposing their information, but you do need to have that information in order for Amazon to be able to match it. Okay, I think we have maybe one more. How many queries does Intentwise provide? I don't have an exact number. Maybe Kenton, do you know the exact number of queries?
Out of the box, I think we have like around 10 of the instructional queries built into the platform. But like Ryan was mentioning earlier, we have the ability to build any number of custom queries. We have a team in-house that's here to help, a team full of SQL experts here to help you build those custom queries based off of any business needs you may have. So really, the true number of audiences or reports that we can build is unlimited. But out of the box, I believe it's around 10 instructional queries that can help answer some of those basic business questions.
Yeah, and when you work with Intentwise on AMC, you do get access not only to the platform to run the queries, but you get an allotment of custom queries that you can ask our team to write for you every single month. So that is definitely the best way to get value out of AMC. But with that, if you have further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Find us on LinkedIn, Ryan Burgess, Kenton Snyder, Kenton@intentwise.com, Ryan@intentwise.com, or stop by if you're going to the Prosper Show. We will be there in a few weeks in Las Vegas at booth number 425. So come say hi. We'd love to meet you in person. And thank you again to everybody who's joined today. We are running out of time, so we're going to go ahead and end the session, but don't hesitate to reach out if you still have follow-up questions for us. Thank you again, Ken. It was another great session.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.